Welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniels America here on the Midnight Ride Network, your home of the anti-establishment movement in this country. With me as always, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Chris.
Well, I could be better, Jack. Have you checked my 401k, my
It's
501c,
it's
all of those
probably not
things?
good.
That's a joke. It's been an interesting few weeks, and I think I missed the show last week.
You
Right?
did.
Missed the show last week, and I'm sure you guys talked about the tariffs just a bit and the trade wars that are imminent. I don't want to beat a dead horse on that today, but at the same time, I think it has to be discussed. I want to talk about tariffs. I want to talk about birthright citizenship. I want to talk about why it seems that we can't get control of these universities where you literally have, I don't know, I don't want to call them terrorists just yet, but let's just say they're terrorists in blooming.
Mm-hmm.
Waiting for that ripe opportunity, it seems. I never thought I would see the day where universities, particularly in New York, would become anti-Semitic. But here we are, and we have to discuss what that means for the future. I have a lot of things, as you can imagine, to discuss today, including the blood moon that's going to occur tonight, which I think is fitting considering how messed up everything appears to be. And we may even get to Russia and Ukraine and all that stuff. But first things first, tariffs. Don't turn the channel just yet. Just because we're not talking about conspiracies and aliens doesn't mean this can't be helpful.
Wait, we're not talking about conspiracies and
Not
aliens
unless
today?
they're being taxed.
They probably
Not
are.
unless they're being taxed. Here's the thing. I only want to talk about this because I've seen such a misconception on social media. And I guess we're all caught up still in this vibe, right? This tribal war that we're engaging in right now. Now, I want to be really clear. Both Jack and myself, we are Trump supporters.
100%.
We voted for Donald Trump, and we could not stomach the idea that another Biden-type presidency could occur, or a Harris presidency for that
Even
matter,
worse.
or an Obama president for that matter. In other words, no Democrat should be in that seat. But just because we are Trump supporters doesn't mean that everything that occurs has to be rubber stamped. Or conversely, everything the Democrats do has to be repudiated. Sometimes there's a discussion that has to be had about the right course of action. And right now, the Democrats are a lost party. I think you would agree with that.
100%.
I've never seen a more dysfunctional, corrupt, vile group of people in my life. Now, I'm not suggesting that every Democrat is like that, but it's a disproportionately high number of Democrats that are like that. So that party's lost and broken. The key in fighting that lost and broken party is that we don't become monsters ourselves, right?
I too agree with that.
You're trying to fight the monsters. You don't want to become a monster yourself. Now, at the same time, we have to win. We have to fight. But it does beg the question, what are we fighting for? And it can't just be to hurt them or to disrespect them or to, gotcha moments on social media. What are we fighting for? I'm going to tell you what I think we should be fighting for, and that is the American experiment. What are we trying to conserve, if not the idea that we have to be free to conduct our lives without the interference of politicians, without the interference of government? I want to be clear about something. When conservatives are skeptical of government, it's not just that government's just this vague concept. We know what government is. Government is nothing more than politicians. It is the extension of their collective will. These sorry, good-for-nothing, low-life liars that get elected to office, and then they feel like they can control the rest of us. So what we're asking for is a space where those people, the least capable people on the planet, where those people can't be telling me how to live my life. For example, if I want to drink a big sugary drink from the fountain at the convenience store, I should be allowed to. If I want to keep my hard-earned taxes because I work so hard for them, I should be allowed to. If I want to say no to a vaccine, I should be allowed to. And you say, well, why is that? That's dangerous. It's my right as an American. I want to live in a space where politicians can't control my life. Is that too much to ask?
No, I think that's what this nation was founded on. So I think we were built on that.
So that's what we're trying to preserve, or conserve, as the case may be. The founders gave us a space by which we could experiment. The federal government was tiny, tiny, tiny. State governments, for the most part, local governments, tiny, tiny, tiny. People had maximum opportunity, maximum freedom, both socially and economically, and they could live their lives the way they saw fit. I like that mindset.
Yes.
I don't think that's radical. Okay, so I think that's what we're trying to conserve. Now, to the extent that our side does something to violate one of those truths, we can't just say, yeah, and ignore it. I'm not saying we have. I'm suggesting there has to be something more to this debate than blue team bad, red team great, and vice versa, right? I want us to get back to a place in this country where we can have intellectual discussions and debates without so much name calling. Of course, I just called them vile. I get that. I recognize the inherent inconsistency of my statement. But I am willing to at least engage with the Democrats, not to compromise with them because they're dangerous, but to engage with them. Same with the people in our party. Here lately, people in our party, conservatives in our party, doing things that seem contradictory to the conservative movement, such as trying to raise the debt ceiling. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
Such as encouraging a tariff war. And we'll get to that in a second. I'm not suggesting Trump is wrong. I'm suggesting that it's a valuable tool that has to be played delicately and hopefully quickly to negotiate better trade terms for the future. Because if you get entrenched in a trade war, everybody is going to suffer, right? And so I like what he's trying to accomplish. You know, back in 2018, they asked me about these tariffs he was imposing. And I said, look, temporary fix, temporary issue to solve a long-term crisis, perhaps.
Yeah.
And at the time, it made sense. And it may make sense now, but we have to investigate what a tariff is. And you say, well, we all know what a tariff is. No, you don't. No,
I don't think most of us do. I'm not even sure I fully understand it.
Well, here's the thing. I've been watching people debate this on Facebook, and it's kind of like they believe that by increasing a tariff, it's a gotcha moment for that other country.
I've seen that. Yeah.
I saw some guy say, I would hit China with a 500% tariff. I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And let me tell you why I say that. Because a tariff is paid for by the importer of the good. Let me explain how this works. A tariff isn't paid for by China directly. It hits them indirectly, and I'll explain that in a second. Whenever there's a tariff increase on Chinese products and an American businessman wants to bring in those products to sell, he has to pay a higher tax on those products. You see, it's the importer that pays the tax, not the Chinese. Let me say it again. The importer, the American business, pays the tax. Y'all know that, right? I mean, this is basic economics. But it seems people think that we'll show Canada, we'll make them pay the tax. That's not what's happening. When you raise a price on a Canadian good and the importer has to pay that tax, which he does, he has to absorb it. And then, you know what happens. What do you think happens to the price of that good when he goes to sell it? It skyrockets. So I created a story today to try to explain people what a tariff is and the potential problems with tariffs over a long period of time. One of two things are happening here. Either Trump is an absolute genius, which I believe he is, and he's going to use these tariffs to negotiate better long-term trade pacts for everybody, and hopefully over time resurrect the American manufacturing base. Those are all good moves. But if he misplays one of these cards,
it is a calculated risk at best.
It's not just a risk, it's devastating. Yeah. Because if it goes south now, this could be a 20 or 30 year cycle that could be problematic. Now, if you're 18 years old and you're in high school now cruising around, it's no biggie, right? Because you're going to be about 45 when it all ends. But if you're our age and you're thinking about retirement in the next 20 or 30 years, this could be devastating. So let's at least play our cards correctly. So here's the story, okay? Once upon a time, I wrote this today, Jack. Once upon a time, the big and busy country of America, we loved all sorts of things. Did you know that?
Yeah,
I'm going to talk to you like we're talking to a first grader here. We liked shiny toys, and we liked cool clothes, and we liked fast cars.
Spinny wheels.
We like stuff like that. But those things, a lot of them, weren't available in this country, at least not cheaply. So we looked over to a faraway land. Call it Europe, call it China, I don't care what you call it. We look to a faraway land and we say, oh, those are some neat items. They have cheap TVs. They have cheap, flashy, shiny things. I think we'll import those and sell them here. So sure enough, it begins to happen. It's not the government that's doing the importing here. This is something else people seem to be confused about. These are American businesses doing the importing. Washington's not doing the importing. Washington's taxing the import.
Yeah.
So these are American businesses. Okay, you have a business. You're selling trinkets. You look over to China. You find 50,000 trinkets at a discounted rate. And you say, dadgummit, I can buy those trinkets and sell them for a profit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you do. Problem with that is an American company could have made that trinket. But because it can't compete overseas with the cheapness of that trinket, you as a consumer buy it from overseas. So the president or whoever decides, this could be a problem because manufacturing is suffering. Let's raise the tax on Jack's trinkets. So now, Jack, when you bring those trinkets in, you have to pay a lot more to import them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the motivation behind that is this. If you are willing to pay it, you certainly may, but chances are you may decide not to and then begin to look locally or perhaps in your own country for that same type of good or service. However, remember, the only reason you went overseas in the first place is because it was cheaper.
Yeah, it's trying to save money.
And now you're having to elevate and spend more money for the same item, which takes productivity away from your pocketbook, right?
Yep.
Okay. Now imagine this rocks alone and China gets wind of it and says, whoa, this is crazy. You're hurting our sales now because Americans aren't buying our product because the importers having to pay additional taxes. So China slaps, tariffs on us in exchange. Now you're in a trade war. And I'm going to tell you something, nobody ever really wins in a trade war. That's the reality. And so what happens now is both sides are waging this war, taxes on their own citizens, depleting private revenue for consumption and investment, and increasing the cost of goods across the board. And they're hoping the other side blinks. And that's the genius of what Trump is doing. If the other side does blink, this is going to be magnificent. But if they don't blink, there's a price we're all going to be paying, and that's the risk here. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying that it is a calculated, scary gamble, because what happens is if no one blinks, prices will keep rising. When prices rise, consumption drops. When consumption drops, two big things happen. Productivity drops, so we don't have the cash in our pockets anymore we would have had otherwise, but government revenue also drops. So on one hand, you think we're making more money for the government via the tariffs. You may not be. If you drive down consumer confidence and you drive down consumption and the vibrant economy you had prior to the tariff, everybody has less money in their pocket. Now we're racing quickly toward a recession. Businesses begin to struggle. Farmers lose their biggest customers. Do you know what it would be like if you're a farmer and you're trying to sell your cattle to, pick your country. You're trying to sell cattle to a country, and all of a sudden your government or their government puts a tariff on that.
Mm-hmm.
And now the person that was going to buy your cattle says, dadgummit, I can't afford your cattle anymore. But you made it thinking it was
you were going to sell that cow.
Yeah. Now what do? You're stuck. Yeah. We saw this back in 2018. The farmers got in trouble. We spent billions to bail them out, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Tariffs, listen to me, this isn't a football game. We're not playing bowling here. It's not a basketball or baseball game. Tariffs can be devastating. So unless this is played precisely and played well, it's going to cause some suffering. Now, I hear the argument, it's just time for us to suffer for a better America. I'm in. I'm willing to sacrifice. But we have to also understand what that sacrifice might very well look like, okay? I've got the data here. And you think to yourself, okay, trade war, boom, boom, tariffs. Everybody's fighting, right?
Yeah.
These are aggressive actions. So the key, now this is the other part of the thing I haven't explained to you. Even though the American importer is paying the tax, it would drive down his incentive to purchase the foreign product, which might drive up his incentive to buy an American product.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means American manufacturing theoretically should increase. That's a great thing. We all want to see manufacturing increase, but it begs the question, how long would it take? Because just simple expansion depends on supply chains. Simple expansion depends on goods and services and a trained workforce. Even a small expansion of the American productivity and manufacturing base would take 1 to 3 years. Have you seen the market?
It doesn't look good.
What if it drops like that for the next year and a half or 2 years?
I'm going to use your word you've been using. Devastating.
No, look.
Devastating.
The conservative press is saying nothing to see here. Just ignore it. And that's fine. I mean, I'm in for the sacrifice. I'm in for the fight. I am pro-Trump. I want him to win this. But when your retirement account is disappearing,
Mhm.
and when these jobs begin to dry up in the interim because there's less revenue and less
Yeah.
productivity, and unemployment goes up and spending goes down, and the price of gold skyrockets out the roof because people are looking for a safe haven, what do? They tell us to suck it up. It's easy to say when you're a billionaire.
It's real easy to say in that regard.
Okay, it's easy to say when you're a billionaire, but when you're nickel and diamond as a person making less than $50,000 a year, and all of a sudden the price of gas and goods and commodities goes up again, and you've already maxed out your credit cards, that's the other problem. Americans are already maxed out with their borrowing. Where do they go? They'll have to cut, they'll have to slash, they'll have to burn. Consumption is what drives the economy. We will tank if we're not careful. Now, we're still making profits, and that's what we're hearing. The economists are saying not a big concern here because profits are still being made, and that's true, and that's wonderful. What about in 6 months?
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
I want us to win this, but I don't want us to bury our head in the sand and pretend that tariffs are a good thing.
Well, let's also be honest about something. Again, you can support somebody and be on their side and still disagree with them from time to time. And I'm not saying that we disagree with Trump on the tariffs because it's still a to be seen type project, but it is scary if it does drag out. If this is a game that continues to go on for years, you're right, we're going to be in trouble. And again, I do believe, given the benefit of the doubt, just because we've seen early successes. But how far does that benefit of the doubt extend for you?
Here's my concern. And, you have to say it. You have to keep saying it 1,000 times because if you say one thing that could be inferred or implied that somehow we're against the president, people will hate our guts.
Absolutely.
We support the president. We support what he's trying to accomplish here. But let me explain what could be happening and how this could be a problem over time. Do you know his recent actions have basically made the Canadian government more emboldened than ever?
I've seen.
They are playing the victim to their people, and their people are rallying to their cause. Who do you think will blink first in that endeavor?
Well, based on the fact that their people are booing on the national anthem at sporting events and have rallied that America's the enemy, whereas meanwhile in our country, we're at odds at who's at fault. You probably got half the country that's supporting Canada in that fight. So, yeah, I think America blinks.
The problem is, if you've got an entrenched trade war, whether it's Canada or name your fictional country, whatever the case may be, because I am no fan of the Canadians.
Yeah.
What are they giving us?
Maple syrup.
We've protected them. We've taken care of them. And I'm not talking about the people. They're fine people. I'm talking about the government up there. Yeah. Right? And I'm going to talk about Canada here in a second because we don't need Canada as a 51st state. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit. So I'm no fan of, especially this new Prime Minister saber rattling up there. Who is this guy? Who are the Canadians to rattle a saber? They've done anything but for the last 100 years except live based by our protection. It's like we have surrounded them with this base of military support and strength, and they just sit there smug like a hippie, at a coffee shop while we protect their very existence. So I'm not a big fan of their government. Problem is that if they find themselves in a trade war with us and they're able to rally their people in support, and our base is split, Canada may say, "Hey, we'll fight you for the long haul." Then what? Nobody wants a long-term trade war here. No. This is a delicate situation. Somebody's got to blink at some point and claim victory. And more points. Okay, so short-term job growth could happen as a result of tariffs. 1 to 3 years it would take to get there. We have midterms coming up in a year and a half.
We do. And if we're not in a good spot, based on your smile,
we'll lose the House,
lose the Senate,
and the Senate.
And we'll set up to luse the White House in 2 more years.
Thus handing it over to those lunatics on the left.
Gavin Newsom, probably.
All right, so let's keep talking here. What if you talk about expansion? Not subtle expansion, like a few jobs here and there for industry, but a decent concept or a decent size expansion of industry. Economists say that will take 3 to 7 years. It's worse. What about a long-term, full industrial revival? At best case scenario, 7 to 20 years. Can we last that long? Can my retirement account last that long? Are we going to pay $75 for a Coke at some point? These are questions that people better start asking. Now, again, I'm not an alarmist. I just know tariffs.
Yeah.
And I know that this isn't a game. I support the president. I hope this goes well. I hope somebody blinks, because here's why he's doing it. He's not doing it just for the heck of it.
No.
He's trying to negotiate a trade deal. And we do that because right now other countries have unfair tariffs against us.
Yeah, they've taken advantage of us for years.
They have. So the idea is to step in, use the threats of this potential tariff, and to find ways to remove those burdens of trade with the countries that have been taking advantage of the United States for as long as I can remember. I think it will work. But we also have to be aware that we can't just blindly walk down this path and pretend this is going to be easy.
No, it's not going to be easy. And to be clear, I like the strategy. I like what they're trying, because again, it's better than what we've seen any of the past presidents, in recent memory attempt, because they've just sat back, Chris, and taken it. They've taken the abuse. Well, but I'm still also not naive enough to not be afraid when I see stuff like Trump threatened a 200% tariff on something. I mean, that's still frightening when you think about it.
Keep in mind, as a general rule, free trade is a positive thing. Many economists have argued over the years that if you have a trade between countries, goods and services will cross borders, but armies won't.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. If you have good trade, the oligarchs of those respective countries wouldn't dare go to war with you because they're making too much doggone money.
Yeah.
There's a sense of peace when you have trade with countries. I mean, China wouldn't want war with us because we buy all their gadgets.
Yeah.
So keep in mind, you go to war with China, we stop buying their gadgets, their economy collapses. So there's a balance with all of this. Now, here's the theory behind tariffs, and we're going to wrap this up in just a second. If you impose the tariffs long enough, and you change the American consumer's habit where they don't like cheap stuff anymore, and where they're more patriotic and they buy American goods, then in theory, you'll see a resurgence of the American manufacturing base. The danger is it may take longer than anticipated. Now, had we tried this 40 or 50 years ago, you may have seen a more quick turnaround, but our people are addicted to cheap stuff now, and we have to be aware of that. Have you noticed, okay, for example, have you been to Walmart lately and you've seen these huge 65-inch TVs for like $400?
Yeah.
You know what those things cost like 10 years ago?
Oh, I do. 100%.
That's a combination of technology advancing and competition and free trade driving down the cost. The same for computers. Remember how expensive a computer used to be? And now you can get something 10 times that power for a fraction of the cost. That is trade and technology created that. One more thing, interestingly enough, we got to move on. When you have a free market and free trade, you get better products. Here's an example. Brazil has a pretty punitive tariff on automobiles. So if a Brazilian wants to import an American automobile to Brazil to sell, he has to pay a higher tariff, which excludes, in many instances, American automobiles, because the Brazilian automobiles are so much cheaper than the American automobiles. But guess what they don't have? Good cars. You see what I'm getting at? I mean, the competition's not there to drive up the base and the cost. So what happens is they have an inferior product. Whenever you have competition, this is a conservative principle, it almost always makes everybody better. But protectionism sometimes doesn't. So here we are. Let's just sum it all up. Who pays the tariffs? Americans are paying these tariffs. Ultimately, who pays the tariffs? Higher prices for consumers. And that's where the problem might be if we're not careful. Now, Trump's a brilliant man. He's got his game face on. He's doing super. And if he manages to use this to get some great negotiating key points in this next trade deal, we are all for it.
And we'll sing the praises.
We'll sing the praises. Time will tell. One more quick thing, and I'll wrap this thing up. Get this. It used to be believed by economists that if you had tariffs, that it wouldn't solely be borne by the American consumer. And let me tell you the theory behind that. The argument is that if you have a tariff, say an American government raises a tariff by a certain percent, and the importer has to pay it, right? The argument is that the seller overseas might also reduce the cost to try to offset it, right? Which makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. The problem is the studies have shown that when it happened in 2018, U.S. consumers bore almost 100% of the increased cost. In other words, the foreign manufacturers and sellers of the product really didn't decrease it because of the tariff. They just sent it. We bore the ultimate burden because of that. That could be a lack of materials, could be a lack of a manufacturing base, could be the lack of of skilled workers in certain fields, whatever the case may be, those old theories that somehow this will be shared are no longer really coming to fruition. So it's another kind of a scary moment. One more point. I keep saying that. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to tariffs. Just remember this too. The argument is that we could reduce the debt if these tariffs are substantial enough because it does bring in revenue. But you might also increase the debt if you're not careful. And here's why that is. If you want to reduce the debt, you hope to do that by direct revenue generation via the tariff, but also encouraging domestic production. And that should bring down the debt. The problem is if the higher prices lead to an economic slowdown, and retaliatory tariffs hurt us in consumption as well, you'll have job losses in certain sectors. When that happens, the government has less income taxes to collect. That could actually increase the debt. So again, no one knows how this is going to unfold. Throwing those dice on the table. We'll see what happens. Tariffs, not a preferred way to exercise, not a preferred way to do things. Look at this story. You see that?
I see that.
What's that say?
Shoppers are skimping on cigarettes, Doritos, and Twinkies.
That's a scary moment because these are the staples of the poor.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a terrible thing to say.
It's not untrue because when I've had less money, though, not the cigarettes, but the Doritos and the Twinkies have been lunch before.
So what happens here when you start seeing these spending habits change? People are getting pinched.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting pinched. What are they going to do? They're saying now they're walking out. Kind of funny stories. There's a store in Chicago there, and he says folks are coming in. They'll use the restroom.
Mm-hmm. Then
they'll put their heads down and rush out because they don't want to buy anything.
Yeah.
And the kids are like, I want this and I want that. And he's like, no, we can't afford it. We had to pay higher in gas. Electricity's higher. Rent's higher. You can't buy anything.
Yeah.
There is a ripple effect that occurs because if they're not selling those products, these companies are taking losses. They take losses, they're going to have to take action and terminations and another thing. So it's just be careful. Be careful. Now, here's the good news. I've had nothing but all this negativity. Now I've got some positive stuff to say.
I'm ready for it because you've got me down now.
Yeah, no, don't be down. We're America. We're going to be fine. But, we've been here before. We saw, if you go back to 1983 or so, Reagan was president. The Dow Jones was only at 1,100.
I have read that.
Now you
I
can
don't remember.
Now you could buy a house for $17.
Mm-hmm.
That's a joke. That's a joke. But it was, it was kind of low. Last Monday, it closed down 1,000 points, and it was still at 41,000. So you've seen this incredible jump, in the Dow over that time period. But you remember in '81, right when Reagan came into office, we had crazy inflation, 13.5%, thanks to Jimmy Carter and his presidency. We had high unemployment. I think about 8% or so at the time. And we had crazy high interest rates. Remember, if you mortgaged a home just a few years ago, it was like 5% or something. Mm-hmm. It was 16.64% at the time on average. A lot of folks just couldn't afford a home because you couldn't afford the interest rates on the mortgage, right? Mm-hmm. So Reagan had to find ways to turn this sluggish economy around. He did it by reducing taxes. That's a darn fine move. And I think that's what Trump's trying to do. And if Trump times this just right, a 1-2 of the reduction, we can't say reduction. We want to extend the tax cuts. They're already there, just extend them. But a 1-2 punch of an extension of the tax cuts, a deregulatory environment, and new trade agreements, we could see a golden age. Because we saw a pretty darn good golden age after Reagan did what he did. Now, Reagan did, God bless him, I love him, added too much money to the debt.
Yep. But
at the same time, this whole fight over a Keynesian theory of inflation versus a Reaganite theory of inflation, we won that fight. They really believed that you had to raise taxes to slow down consumption to control inflation.
I remember. And they still believe it.
We took it the other direction. We said, look, no, give us more money and there'll be more productivity.
Yeah.
And inflation will be controlled in a different angle. And that's exactly what happened. So we know these strategies win, but you got to face the political turmoil to get there.
Yeah.
Reagan's approval number went down to 35%.
Wow.
Did you know that?
I did not. And you don't really hear about it because of how big he won by.
Exactly right. Down to 35% in 1983. So he was in trouble. But when the economic reforms kicked in, things took off. All of a sudden, he was at 61% by November and won that massive landslide the next year. So these things happen fast. And if he plays his cards right, it's going to be a really, really cool thing to watch.
Hopefully you're right. Hopefully it's a really, really short-term suffer, but then when the art of the deal comes through, we see the genius behind what's being done. That's what we're hoping for. But again, when you look at stuff and you look at it on its face, you get why there's a reason to be a little concerned and a little scared.
Yeah, what I don't like, just be honest about it.
Yeah.
The conservative press out there is acting like this is nothing. When people are losing tens of thousands of dollars in their retirement account, it's something.
It's real.
It's real. Now, you may be an influencer or be on Fox News and make $17 million a year running your mouth. I guess it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah.
But when you're a poor person in this country, this is incredibly painful.
Poor.
Okay, so there has to be a balance here, and I'm happy to know that we're going to find it. And I firmly believe it's all going to work out. I don't mean to scare anybody. I just want us to keep it real here.
Yep.
The establishment is dangerous. They helped create this junk with all this federal spending.
Yep.
We got to fix it now, and it may hurt just a little bit.
Yep.
All right. Some more cool things that are happening.
You think it's a good idea to let our sponsors talk before we go to the next subject?
How long have we been going?
About 30 minutes.
Well, let's do it then. It sounds perfect.
Escape to Pearl River Resort.
Well, we're back. Chris McDaniels America here on the Midnight Ride Network. And we've been talking about tariffs for 30 minutes.
We have.
I'm sure there's 6 people still watching.
Oh, they turned off long ago.
But
Those
if they
6
are
gone.
watching, they've learned a thing or two about tariffs. Now we're going to talk about things that are super interesting, like illegal immigration. Those are the buzzwords. There's a couple of things that always drive conservative audiences, Jack. Look at me. DEI. Everything goes straight up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Illegal immigration. Straight up. War.
Like, there's a reason why my latest episode of The Right Side had very heavy DEI emphasis because I needed a hit.
Well, here's the thing. Now let's the Trump administration today began to file a series of emergency appeals to the United States Supreme Court. And you may wonder why. Well, here's why. Birthright citizenship. Trump has pledged to end it. Now, there's only so much a president can do to end it, but he can certainly begin that conversation, and he has. And a lot of these initial orders that he's entered have been challenged almost immediately by, pro-illegal immigrant groups. And so far, we've been met with resistance. I mean, one judge said it was just blatantly unconstitutional. Other judges have dismissed the actions outright. Other judges have issued injunctions protecting folks from this potential end of birthright citizenship. And so now the appeals are straight up to the United States Supreme Court. And the question is now, what will the court do? This is a very different court than the courts that have heard these actions before. And this court has a 6-3 conservative majority. Actually, if you don't count Roberts, it's more like 5-4. And Amy can sometimes here lately has been a little tricky. But for the most part, though, she's been with us. Now, I wish we had 6 Alitos. I wish we had 6 Clarence Thomases.
Yeah.
Or 6 Scalias.
Yeah.
I'd be sitting here smiling right now if that were the case.
So we wouldn't worry about it.
Well, because Roberts is going to do whatever he thinks he has to do to preserve his intellectual status and the establishment status he's familiar with.
His legacy.
He likes the cocktail circuit.
Yeah.
And look, he's brilliant. You can't take anything away from his intellect, but he's so brilliant, he'll curve a sentence in a heartbeat to get to his decision, even if it's not consistent with originalism or certain interpretive principles.
See how he saved Obamacare.
Exactly, but you can't take away the man's brilliance. He's just squirrely, as they may say from time to time. Now, birthright citizenship. People have had this debate for a long time. We've had it years ago on the radio, but you have to start somewhere. And the current policy is this. If a child is born on our land, and it's not a child of a foreign diplomat or an enemy soldier, legal, becomes a citizen. And you say, whoa, that seems extreme. What about people who are illegal? I'll give you an example. Let's just say an illegal couple crosses over from Mexico. And let's say 25 yards inside the United States, the lady gives birth to a child. Is that child a citizen of the United States?
No.
I don't know. I'm
don't know.
No, listen, I'm with you. I'm with you. I don't think it should be. But we have this big 14th Amendment, and its language is tricky. And I want to go through it because this isn't as simply as saying, they're not from here, it can't happen. It's much more complex than that because the drafters of the 14th Amendment didn't really take time to consider these issues, and they left it in a relatively vague state. The 14th Amendment could have been worded much better in many areas. It changed the fabric of the government substantially. But this is the first sentence of the 14th Amendment, and it deals with birthright citizenship. Now, here it is. You ready? All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. It's broad. All persons born, there's the word or, naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states in which they reside. Now, the 14th Amendment was written specifically, that section was written to overrule Dred Scott. That silly, stupid decision, Dred Scott, where they basically ruled that African Americans cannot be citizens. That was a substantive due process case that really abused the individual rights of Americans. Not our finest moment at all. But this was passed in response to that, an attempt to fix it. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Trump administration is arguing that one little phrase in the center of that sentence should control. And what is that phrase? And subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Sounds vague.
It's different. And so here's what you do. Because we are constrained as judges or as lawyers, we're supposed to be, to the words of the document. We're not supposed to add words. We're not supposed to subtract words. We're supposed to try to understand the words as they were intended. Scalia would look at that and he would say, okay, an originalist approach. Because textualism here doesn't get you there. You have to try to understand what subject to the jurisdiction thereof meant at the time it was written and how it was understood at the time it was written. So where do you get that data? The answer is debate. Congress debated the 14th Amendment, and there was a lot of debate about what that phrase meant. So what we do know is that phrase had some meaning to those men at the time, and it looked like primarily they were trying to exclude foreign diplomats or foreign soldiers whose children could have been born here. There was a couple of statements people always utilize. Senator Jacob Howard on the floor, he said that this will not, of course, include persons born in the U.S. who are foreigners, aliens, who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers. If you stop right there, you may have an argument. They actually end birthright citizenship. But others, such as Senator Lynn Trumbull, he said that what that phrase meant was not owing allegiance to anybody else, not subject to any foreign power. He's speaking there directly to diplomats, it would seem. What we've got here is a conundrum. It gets worse. It turns out we have a case that's close to being on point, but not quite on point. This case was decided way back in 1898. I assure you, that was not a super conservative Supreme Court in 1898. But the case is called United States versus Wong Kim Ark. You may say, Wong Kim Ark, that sounds foreign. Yes. It involved a child of resident citizens. Not citizens, resident immigrants.
Okay.
So they were here technically legally. They weren't illegal, as the case may be. And the court ruled that child was a citizen, born here. A citizen. So they're going to cite that to strike down the argument that birthright citizenship does not apply in that instance. There was another case, Fowler versus Doe. This will really tick you off. This was Texas. There was a time that Texas prohibited public education for children of undocumented immigrants. That's not a bad law.
I like it.
I mean, if you're illegal here and you don't belong here, why should the taxpayer dollars go to pay for your public education, right? Does that make sense?
But I got a bad feeling I know where this is going.
Yeah, the Supreme Court struck down the Texas law and ruled that undocumented immigrants and their children are persons under the 14th Amendment and entitled to equal protection of the laws. In other words, usually in that case, you argue they're subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the case law is piling up pretty bad against us. Mm-hmm. So the Supreme Court is going to have to literally twist and turn and reverse some cases that seem to be in stark contrast with what we want, which is a common sense reading of that subject to the jurisdiction thereof and ending birthright citizenship once and for all. So the question is, what will happen? And their answer is, no one knows. I will suggest that Roberts is not going to be with you.
I think you're accurate.
I will suggest that maybe, here's what's crazy, even Thomas, as strict and an originalist as he has been, may be frozen to take action here. Scalia, before he passed away, was asked about this. He said it was a settled issue. Scalia, our hero.
Yeah.
So the court's going to struggle with this one. Now, what will happen? I don't know. The court has 1,000 ways to avoid ruling on something if they don't want to rule on it, right? But if they do get a chance to rule on this, they're going to have to figure out a proper way to split the baby, so to speak. Mm-hmm. By the way, the court's never explicitly ruled on whether children of undocumented immigrants are entitled to birthright citizenship. Remember, the other one wasn't undocumented. They were residents, not residents. Yeah. They weren't citizens. They were resident aliens, not citizens. It's going to be interesting, man. What's your prediction?
Well, just based on history, it's either going to be a case that they're not going to take up or it's going to go against us. I mean, and I hate to be the negative one in the room, but I mean, I'm just going back and looking when we've seen these type things come up before. The courts have never, they have constantly gone down the path that I think is incorrect. But I mean, when you pointed out, Chris, that you've got Thomas who might be frozen by it. You've got folks that look at this issue and say that it's already been settled. Well, if it comes before them and they feel like it's already been settled, even the most conservative person, if they feel it's been settled, the conservative point of view is it's settled.
Well, that's what Roberts is going to do. Roberts is a firm believer for the most part in precedent.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I bet you he has sleepless nights overturning Roe versus Wade.
I bet he rolled
over every possible way trying to find a way not to do that. He is a big believer in precedent. Of course, my position is if a precedent is bad and it's unconstitutional, it still is bad and unconstitutional and should be reversed.
Yeah.
And we've done that in the past, and the liberals had no problem in reversing cases pretty quickly. But when it comes to their cornerstone issues, they love to cite precedent. Here's another case that kind of speaks to the issue. It's Elk versus Wilkins. Did you know that this was back in 1884. Native Americans that were born on the soil were not citizens because of this decision in large part. They said that they were sovereign tribal nations, and so they weren't subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? Yeah. They weren't born on American soil. Those are sovereign nations. So I see the distinction there. That was reversed, by the way, thankfully, by the Citizenship Act of 1924. I mean, certainly our Native American friends deserve to be citizens if they wish to be. Bottom line here is it's a complicated case because we have this precedent staring at us. The Supreme Court could get clever. I'd like to see how Alito comes down on this.
You asked me my prediction. You're the attorney in the room. Where's your prediction?
I think we lose 6-3.
I think you're accurate. I think that's exactly where I saw it, 6-3, maybe even 7-2 if somebody that we like just can't move.
What would be crazy if it was a 9-0 thing? It'd be like, oh.
If it's 9-0, my jaw will drop. I mean, because I don't see that happen.
Well, here's the thing. Alito is a brilliant person, and I know where his mindset is, probably when it comes to this issue. And if anybody can find a way to write a beautiful dissenting opinion of this endeavor, he could do it.
Yeah.
But my goodness, it's going to be interesting because you have to try to figure out what that means, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And I read it in a vacuum, and I say, well, clearly, they don't belong here. They're not subject to our jurisdiction. But if they've crossed over, right, they are subject to the laws.
Yeah.
That's why they're arrested when they do something wrong. It's tricky. Me personally, I don't like the idea of birthright citizenship.
I don't either.
I think that from the example I just used, and it's an extreme example, but you can't just cross over and have a baby and that baby becomes a citizen. It defies common sense to me.
It does.
But here we are staring at the 14th Amendment, and it's kind of punching me in the nose, and that's what the court has to come to grips with.
You know, is it one of those cases, Chris, where you're happy you're not one of those justices, or are you somebody that would love to
I would dive right up in the middle of this. I'd have my law clerks detail, trying to figure out every conceivable use of that phrase from the 1700s until when that was adopted, right?
Yeah.
I'd go back to early English if I could and try to figure out what they meant by that phrase.
You'd write a hell of a dissenting argument after
It'd
they
be
lost.
a 75-page dissent. And probably be, laughed. Every law professor in the country would probably judge it harshly, but I'd have a good time writing it. All right, more things. Since we're talking about illegals, let's talk about Canada.
Okay, let's get there. You said we were.
I like when Trump is messing with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of funny to me when he says our beautiful 51st.
It does great.
I don't know why that's funny to me, but it's just because there's no chance that happened.
No, and he knows that.
But it's just hilarious when he says those things. The better question is for us is, why would anybody want Canada to be a state in this union? And you say, well, my goodness, they make good syrup and some decent whiskeys. I don't know. Here's what I know. Ask yourself this question. I'm dead serious about this. Which would be the more liberal state, assuming they were a state? California or Canada?
Canada.
Yes. They have universal health care.
Yep.
They elect basically socialists for their leaders.
Yep.
We have too, but not like them. You bring Canada into this union, we won't win another presidential race the rest of my lifetime.
And how many electoral votes are they going to get?
Well, I guess they'd get 2. I mean, unless they found a way to break up all the provinces in separate countries, then they come in with 75. I don't know how many electoral votes. I don't know how many they'd get. It would be like, how would you break that down? What's their population? Let's just see here. Jack, carry on with the audience why I get Canada's population.
It's got to be high, and that's why I'm questioning how many electoral votes could they possibly get, because I think it's going to be higher than California. And if I'm right, and they get more electoral votes than California, and you combine a Canada state with California state, Chris is 100% accurate. We will never win another election again because all the electoral votes will be gobbled up by 2 states right there. I mean, you might as well then do away with the electoral college because it won't matter when you add Canada to the insanity.
I don't know. Let me just see what this number. Holy Lord! If Canada becomes a state, they would have 57 electoral votes based on my math.
Wow.
Now I'm not a mathematician. They probably have 6, but it looks like based on my math, they would have. Let's do the math here. So how does this break down? 41 million people.
Wow.
There's about an average of $761,000 per 761,000 citizens per House district. That would give them 55 representatives. They would have 2 senators.
They would control the country, essentially.
57 electoral votes. No one wants Canada anywhere near this system.
No.
They would destroy it.
Trump doesn't really. He just likes he sees it funny, sees it as a dig at him. He doesn't want Canada as the 51st state. It's just something hilarious, he says, because it gets under Canada's skin.
Yeah, which I don't mind that. I thought it was funny watching the Canadian PM and some others kind of bowing their chests out like they're going to do something in this trade deal.
That does crack me up.
If it's one thing when China's flexing her muscles or when Russia's flexing her muscles or maybe even, Britain.
Yeah.
Canada, you're like, okay.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Out-polite me?
Unless we're playing hockey, they don't get my respect.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I like Canadians.
Yeah, the people are great people. They're super polite. That's what they're known for, being polite.
Are you sure about that?
I've read it somewhere. Being polite, drinking maple syrup, and hockey. That's what they're known for.
Well, they're pretty good in hockey. So are the Russians, though.
Their whiskey, I disagree with you. They don't have decent. Their whiskey's not good.
Tell us more about your alcoholism, Jack.
I've had drinks on this very show before, so people have already seen it.
I'm not sure I would
You went away. You went away, and Jim broke out the bottle.
Which one was it?
It's the one right behind you that now is decidedly less full.
Unbelievable. What did y'all do that? You're on a show?
Yes, live on the air.
Goodness gracious. The Jefferson's Reserve?
The Jefferson's Reserve. Look, it was his fault. He let me pick the whiskey. It was his idea, but he let me pick the whiskey. Of course I'm going to pick Jefferson.
Well, clearly you picked the most expensive one back there.
Well, I mean, this show is a conservative-based show.
So bring your own whiskey to the show.
Why wouldn't we say, if we're going to drink a whiskey, Jefferson just felt right.
I guess so. I guess free Jefferson felt even better.
Was that
right? Free Jefferson?
Free Jefferson's the best.
That's the best bourbon in the world when it's free. Well, enough of that. I wonder what that cost. That's going to be if these. Let's see. I wonder what it would cost to a Canadian now to buy if the whiskey tariffs are increased in Canada.
Have you seen that? There was one I had a second ago where I think it's France has instituted a 50% tariff on American whiskey. The EU. It wasn't just France. The EU did.
The European Union, the idea behind the EU was to have this nice, smooth trading bloc.
Yeah.
Of course, those cats can't get along.
No.
They're about as bad as we are.
How many wars have they fought against each other throughout the history of the world?
They've gotten better. They've gotten better until this whole Ukrainian thing occurred. But here's the thing, though. So 50%. So what they're basically saying is that if you're a bar owner in the EU and you want to buy your alcohol from America, you'll have to pay the EU 50% more.
Yep.
Based on that tax. And what they're trying to encourage, they're trying to hurt us naturally, and it will. And don't get me wrong. I mean, if you're in bourbon country right now, and these tariffs are hitting you, and you got all this stockpile, that's called a shock to the system. But I mean, what do they turn to if they don't have good American bourbon? I guess the Irish can help them out.
Yeah,
with the whiskeys. England doesn't have anything worth drinking, with the exception of maybe some cheap gins.
Couple of gins, yeah.
And maybe Newcastle. How do the English? I don't even know what they're doing. They can't eat or drink like any other country. It's terrible.
Yeah, you don't go to an English restaurant. You don't go to an English style restaurant. Nobody flocks to those. I don't think they exist.
I've seen one.
It was empty.
I've seen one in all my travels, and it was probably more Scottish than it was English. Mm-hmm. Which the Scots can't claim a high level of sophistication when it comes to chow, but it's more than the English. And that says a lot.
Yeah,
that says a lot. The best food, of course, best food in the world. I'm not trying to be anti-American here. Don't tell me hamburgers are the best food in the world or hot dogs are the best food in the world. I know they're great, but we're talking about countries and cuisines.
Yeah. Since we have nothing else to talk about today. Yeah.
Except tariffs. The best food in the world is French and Italian. Mm-hmm. And as those countries come closer together in that sweet spot next to their border, that's where all those nice Alfredos and those butter sauces come from. That's almost a darn perfect meal, right? Look, how can you beat pasta, bread, and cheese?
You can't. There's a reason why, we love New Orleans cuisine, because it's inspired by a lot of that French cuisine and, mixed in with some of that Italian cuisine. And to me, it's some of the best in America is right there in New Orleans.
Yeah, New Orleans food is infused by about, as many cultures as are on the planet, because it's a trade city and a port city. Yeah. And you got 400 years or so of these cultures converging, and they each bought some of the best things in the world. The French were there, the Spanish were there, and now you've got the Louisiana folks that have their own unique cuisines, and you factor in America, and you throw it all together and shake it up. It's absolutely incredible down there. But no, if you had to pick a country, I guess the point of all this, we cannot allow tariffs to be raised on pasta.
Yeah.
And cheese.
I'm not a big fan of this, tariffs that might raise the Irish whiskey on us, which probably will happen because I like Irish whiskey. Back to my alcoholism.
Now Jameson's going to cost as much as that reserve back there. Good luck with that. The Irish aren't that. The Irish have no money.
No.
They go back to drinking patties, and nobody knows what I'm talking about.
Oh goodness.
Anyway, enough of that. I saw an article today that reminded me about. I keep hearing all these rumors of a civil war. You keep reading all this online?
I've seen some of the chatter. Yes.
Now the American left is chattering. Mm-hmm. Leave it to the people with no guns to talk about a civil war. Who are they? What are they going to do? Knock down a post office and paint a swastika on it like they always like to do? What are they doing?
saber rattling without sabers.
I found an article that was really interesting. This guy was actually talking about the possible solutions to avoid a civil war.
Mm-hmm.
Now, nobody wants a civil war.
No.
I mean, give me a break. I mean, there may be a few good old boys out there itching for it, but no one wants to see that.
Yeah.
I mean, that, if you've got kids, you don't want to see that if you've got children. And we love this country. And even though the American left acts like they do, I'm not sure they love this country, but I wish they would enough not to be foolish.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I found this article. It's really interesting. He was arguing that we can save it in one of a handful of ways. And the first is the way that you and I have professed on this very show multiple times. He was arguing that go back to the original concept of a very tiny federal government. And I said, that's what we've been saying for 20 years, right? Maybe he listened to the show. Here's the point. If you go back to where we're not fighting over the federal apparatus in Northern Virginia, we don't care who controls it because they don't have any power to hurt us. Now, all of a sudden, states can regain their sovereignty and their powers. They can govern accordingly based on the people's wishes. And if California wants to create a great utopian socialist paradise, it may.
Yeah.
But if Mississippi wants to have a strong, vibrant, Mayberry-type nostalgic setting, it may. What's wrong with peace in our time? That would be the best possible way to make sure that we're not angry, that we're not fighting over D.C., and that we basically respect each other's right to self-govern. Right now, all that's happening is we basically want our side to control D.C. so it can dispense favors to our side. Think about it. Money, donors, contracts, jobs. That was never the intent of Washington, D.C. It was supposed to be minuscule, tiny, mostly in foreign affairs, right? Mm-hmm. That's not what it does now. It tries to touch every single thing occurring. The good news is Trump and Musk are trying to minimize the beast as best they can under very difficult circumstances, but it's going to take more. There used to be a position where you thought maybe we could starve the beast, cut off its income. But nobody seems interested in doing that because even if we cut off its income, the stupid politicians keep spending and driving up the debt. So it seems to be a never-ending struggle. The key is to limit its responsibilities, to dismantle these departments like Trump and Musk are trying to do, and to force those powers back to the states where they belong. If you do that, you have peace in our time. Number two, we got to regain the education system somehow. Because the last 20 years, we're just literally building little socialists, aren't we?
They are.
Education, ultimately, should be about how to be a productive citizen. We got rid of home ec. I don't know why. Maybe it was sexist. We got rid of shop. I don't know. Maybe it was sexist. But it taught our kids how to be productive citizens. These kids, some of them can't even do basic math, home economics now. Yeah. That's not a bad term. Home ec is not a bad term. Everybody who has a home has to learn to govern themselves accordingly based on the rules of the economy. That's what you learn there. Shop. Boys used to be able to do things with their hands.
Yep.
I know, that's sexist. Toxic masculinity. God forbid a boy can weld something. But we need welders in the community, don't we?
We absolutely
We need carpenters in the community. We need bricklayers in the community, plumbers in the community. And these people can make really good money. But all of a sudden we get rid of that. And instead we replace it with all these classes where we're indoctrinating these kids, right? DEI this, and socialism this, and America Sucks 101. You've seen the classes,
absolutely,
right? And so the kids come out with a natural distaste, not just toward government, which they seem to embrace because they've been taught to trust it, but they have a distaste toward America itself and the old traditions of America itself. That has to stop. So I think one of the ideas, if we could somehow recapture the public education system, we might could find a way to return it back to regular patriotic Americans and then see our kids grow up in a more, I don't know, well-adjusted concept, right? While I'm complaining about that, Jack, if you go to college one day and you major in 13th century women's studies, and then you expect me to pay your bills because you can't make a living, that ain't my fault.
No, it's not.
That ain't my fault. I don't care if you love women's studies. You may want to major in Latin, a dead language. Yeah. Learn it, write it, enjoy it. You can't make a living with it.
Nope.
So if you spend $200,000 getting a doctorate in Latin, that's beautiful. You're now the smartest dumb guy in the room.
That's correct.
But if you can't make a living with it, why should we have to bail you out?
We shouldn't.
But what do we teach our kids in high schools?
Oh.
Just be happy.
Go to college.
Chase your dreams.
Major in whatever you want. The most famous thing nowadays, Chris, from the left, you hear it all the time, especially with some of the trans. Live your truth. Live your truth.
Here's my truth. I got bills to pay.
Yeah.
That's my truth.
Yeah.
And so I was always very practical. It's not like I rushed into law school with glee. That took a lot of time and effort.
Yeah.
I would have rather been down at the pool in the springtime.
Yeah.
I'm not studying for exams. So, but I knew that I had to find something that I can make a living with. And it wasn't going to be my English degree.
Yeah.
That was unemployable. Right?
Yeah.
Bottom line is, I was always taught because I had good teachers in high school and because I had great parents. And they taught me, boy, the whole point of this is not an exercise in your happiness. The whole point of this is to make a living whereby you can pay your bills. I don't know what happened. So how do we avoid the oncoming Civil War? Maybe we get control of the classes. And then lastly, we have to dissuade people about this concept that this is a democracy.
Yeah.
Democracies are incredibly dangerous. 4 people in a democracy of 5 can take away that man's life, his living, his property, right?
Yep.
We're not a democracy. We have a republic form of government that demands that certain rights are protected no matter the will of the mob.
Yep.
But again, what do we teach them in school? If you vote a certain way, you get what you want.
Yep.
And what have they voted for? $36 trillion in debt and an end to the American experiment.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, at this point, I'm just complaining because I have nothing else to talk about. Want to help me complain a bit?
Well, I think you've exhausted a lot of the complaints, and I agree with them.
Yeah.
But Chris, it's good to have you back this week, though. I know you've been had a very, very busy schedule lately, and I don't think it's about to lighten up, but it's always better when we have you here. Jim and I think, do an admirable job, but I think the show's always better with you. Just my honest opinion.
I appreciate that. I know you guys do a good job, and I want to make it whenever I can, but I still got to pay the bills. That was the whole point of that last segment.
Absolutely.
The excuse for missing the next 3 shows.
The next 3? Jim, we got to talk to Chris about this.
It's funny though. You guys are listening. You got the videographers in here and the sound people are in here, and they're wonderful people. Did y'all drink whiskey the other night too? She says no.
They had to be professional.
I'm gonna tell you something. The idea that you finally broke that open without me it's either a sign of your great despair that I wasn't here.
That was it. Jim was.
The sign that you don't want to share any whiskey.
Well, Jim wanted to toast the early days of Trump and him hiring me on at the paper, so it was a double fault.
Oh my gosh, were y'all slurring your words at the end?
No, I know I wasn't, and Jim wasn't, because Jim kept watering down his drink throughout. He kept adding ginger ale to it, so he never got close to slurring his. I may have got close, but
my favorite play-by-play radio guy was Harry Carey.
Mm-hmm.
And Harry Carey had a tradition, and he would sit out with the bleacher bums, at least originally, and he would call the game from the bleachers at Wrigley Field. It also happened that he would be drinking the entire game. And by about the 6th or 7th inning, it was tough to understand what he was trying to say. And I kind of envision y'all doing that.
We were not here.
And in fairness, your ratings would skyrocket.
Oh, they were. That was probably our highest rated episode.
He used to take his shirt off out there in the bleachers. If only y'all did that would be absolutely disgusting.
Jim, I volunteer you for that.
Jim's like, okay, we'll do it. All right, well,
I'll wear the rhino mask. That's as far as I go.
There are limits.
There are limits.
Only certain things we can do.
Exactly.
So it's a family show.
I'm looking out for the listener, for the viewers.
Yeah, trust me. We have enough blindness.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's enough of this. Listen, we enjoy y'all being here. This is Jack. Good show. Thank you for being here. This has been Chris McDaniels America here on the Midnight Ride Network, your home of the anti-establishment movement in this country. And yes, we are pro-Trump. And yes, we hope he wins this trade war. Because if not, retirement is not in our future.
Pain.
We'll see you next time.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft. and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit mypillow.com.